The theme of today's share is again getting ready for Kabbalas Torah, and specifically Lag BaOmer, the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, their challenge, and that the big Nagefa, that there was all of his Talmidim were nifter during this time because they were not kavod zelazet. They didn't show respect for each other. It's not how they acted towards each other. And we're going to learn about why that was, why specifically during this time, and how we could get ready for Kabbalas Torah, what we could do to show kavod. Okay. Somebody told me a story this Shabbos that many of you might know who this person is. He bought a new house and he wanted to renovate it, and he found out about some opportunity to renovate his house, that there's some TV show would pay for his house to get renovated in a very stylish way, and they would just have to agree to be on the show, and they would renovate it for them. They would have to put in a little bit of money on their own, but still there was some cash that they were given, and it was guaranteed to be done and within a month, and so on. And because it's a show and it's entertainment, so they don't want just people, being so cordial to each other and so nice and friendly. They want some arguing, and they stage it, that they take them around to different houses, which, as if they're looking to buy a new house, and they're getting set up, and they find the right home. And there's one guy's an agent, one of the actors is an agent, and the other one is a guy who's in construction, renovations, contracting, and between the two of them, they set up this family, and they find their dream home, and everything gets very, very nice. So this is a frum family, and they're special people, and they decided, the husband and wife, they decided beforehand that they're not complaining. They're not, they said, we don't want to act in a way that's unbecoming of a Yid. We want to make a Kiddush Hashem. That's our theme. We want to make a Kiddush Hashem. So they take them to a house, and the house is very old-fashioned, not a nice style, run down, and they're waiting for them to complain and to say something negative, and and after a few minutes, like the camera lady or whoever it was that was next to them said, like, stop, like, you're supposed to say this, and they made a big Kiddush Hashem, and basically the idea is that there's a certain feinkeit, there's a certain sensitivity and elevation of a person that feels that a Yid acts in a certain way. We're Mamleches Kainim B'Gai Kadosh, and we're not going to lower ourselves to speak in a vulgar way, to get angry, and so on. So that's what we're going to speak about today in terms of getting ready for Kabbalas Torah. And the first thing that we need to accept the Torah is to make ourselves ready. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give the Torah, but we have to be a clay kibble. We have to be a vessel that the Torah could rest in. So we don't have to, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give the hashpah of the Torah on Shavuot, but are we going to be ready for it?
So you want us to get on television? Is that what you're getting at?
No. I didn't see the show. I can't vouch for whether that everything was exactly kosher on that show, but I think they made a Kiddush Hashem. Okay. I'm gonna. Today's share is from Shlomo Volba from Ali Shur Chelik Beis. It's called Hachana LeKabbalas Torah. It's page 396. Okay. You don't have it in front of you. I'm not going to read it in Hebrew, but the concept, the setup, everything, besides whatever I add in, comes from it. Okay, we live in a world where the world that we have is a world where everything has value to it. There's measurement of value, how precious something is, how important it is. says there's nothing in the world that doesn't have an erech, something that gives a finite, classified something. So, for example, if you have merchandise, you get paid for it. The amount that you get paid, so that's the price. There's a price tag on it. You have an artisan. The artisan does something that he gets paid for his service. Well, if it's a very valuable service, if it's something that not everyone could do, takes a lot of training, it's high demand, and so on. So there's a high price tag on this service. That's in terms of regular things in the world. The question is, what about Kedusha? What about Ruchnius? What about spirituality? You can't put a worldly price tag on that. How are you going to evaluate or show that this is something which is precious? So the answer is, there's something called kavod. We give honor, and that is depending on the amount of kavod that you give to something. That really shows how valuable that is, how important that is to you. If we, for example, he doesn't say this over here, if we perform the mitzvahs, but we don't show kavod to the mitzvahs, so then, yes, we show that it's part of our life, and that's something that we go along with, and that we're not, so to speak, shirking our responsibility. But is this something that's important to us? Is it precious? Do we value it? So if we don't show kavod to it, then it's not. That's where it's lacking. It's lacking in the chashivas and the importance of the matter. So the Gemara says in Kedushin something pretty startling. It says, "Ha'oichal b'shuk daimel lekelev u'pasel le'edus." One who, you can ask your local Orthodox rabbi about this. There's a Gemara without commentaries here. The Gemara says that somebody who eats in the shuk, they're in a shopping mall or who knows what, and that's where they have their lunch. That's where they eat. Daimel lekelev, they're like a dog that has no, it's no busha, no embarrassment, just eating in front of everyone in a public place. U'pasel le'edus, and they're not kosher to testify. Such a pechisa, such a degradation. The reason is he's not concerned with his own kavod, with his own self-respect. Self-respect would be that he would have hold himself a little bit in a more dignified way. In a dignified manner, he's not going to be sitting at the ball game eating the hot dog and hamburger. Okay, it's hard for us to relate to this because we don't live in such a society that really has such a musig of respect. So it's something which we're really lacking. I think that we live in a society where being casual is, that's the way to go. So, okay, maybe more European, so then it's more dignified. I don't know, perhaps Canada is closer to that than the U.S., I don't know. But different parts of Canada. Anyway, so this is the Gemara. Now, this person who's Eichel B'Shuk is not doing any Aveira. Doesn't say in the Torah, you can't do this. But what he's doing is that he's showing that he's a lack of refinement and a lack of self-respect. So that's a psul that he can't be kosher le'edus. The Rav Chaim Shmulevitz has a shmuz that it's called nichbadus, and usually we think of kavod as being a negative thing in ourselves. We think, a person who is very haughty, he's a bagaiva, he thinks he's at the top of the world, everyone should stand up for him, and so on. So he can't get himself dirty. That's like gaiva. That's something that's the opposite of what we need to receive the Torah. To receive the Torah, we need to be humble, we need humility, we need to be able to to roll up our sleeves and do the work and so on. So Chaim Shmulevitz says that nichbadus is something which is a very important thing for a ben Torah, that the person to have self-respect, the person to hold himself in a way of elevation and realize that the Torah is special and the one who studies the Torah is special. They're the recipients. They're the special. Ben Torah is something special. So, I told you the story before. Once, my father was visiting me when I was in Yeshivas Mir in Yerushalayim, and he came. I think he flew in on a Thursday. The plan was to stay through the next Shabbos as well. And I have a sister who lives in Eretz Yisrael, I have a brother who lives in Eretz Yisrael. At that time, now 2 more siblings that live there. So we made up that he's going to come to visit me on Erev Shabbos. He's going to come to the Rosh Hashiva Shmuz, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel's hotel, that was in English. The Shmuz was in English. It wasn't to the whole yeshiva. It was a little bit more close-knit. Close-knit means that whoever wanted in the world could come. But it was in his house, in his dining room, and it was a room a little bit smaller than this, and 2/3 of the size of this room, and it would fill up with bachrim. So someone would sit around the table, and then someone would sit on the chair, then there'd be another rows around the table, and then whoever could get in the door would get in the door and stand, and then whoever couldn't fit in the door would stand on the steps, and then someone would stand on the steps going down, someone would stand on the steps going up, and then whoever couldn't get in the door would stand outside the front door, and so on. And they had speakers outside too. And some of us really connected to it. I personally, one of my favorite parts of it was that he would speak instead of a forceful way, instead of a strong way with a strength, he would speak with a dvar mayotzim min halev, with a soft-spoken way of giving something over. Divrei chachamim b'nachas nishmoin. Chachams, the words of the sages are heard with sweetness and with softness. In this way, he would give it over, and it would be easy for some of us to relate to. So I brought my father to that talk, and right before I brought my father to that talk, so I get a call from my brother, who's I don't remember if my brother or my sister. I get a phone call, and they called actually on my father's cell phone, but they asked him to give the phone to me. They want to speak to me for a minute, and they tell me that my father's brother, his older brother, had passed away. He had been sick. My father went to visit him right before he came to Eretz Yisrael. He went special to New York to visit him from Baltimore, and I think he was in a nursing home, and he passed away as that day on Friday. So now they asked me to tell my father that the funeral is going to be on Sunday, and they're going to try to make arrangements that he could be at the funeral on Sunday instead of staying in Eretz Yisrael. What? In New York. The funeral is going to be in New York on Sunday.
So this is Saturday night.
This is Friday morning. Friday morning, right the early afternoon, right before Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel Shmuz. They tell me that he just arrived. He's going to be very distraught. He had consulted with the doctors beforehand. He didn't want to take this trip if it was going to be that he was going to have to go back in the middle, and his brother was much older than him, considerably older than him, and they didn't grow up at the same time together, but they had a relationship, and my father becoming was because of his brother that was religious, and it was a big connection to that. So anyway, the story goes that my brother advised me, what, don't tell him right now, let him do whatever he's going to do, and then you'll find the right moment to tell him. So I took him to the shmuz, and he got to hear from Rav Nosson Tzvi, and he got to say Shalom Aleichem to him afterwards, and since I had a special kesher, so my father felt very close, and And anyway, so afterwards I take my father to my dorm room and I sit him down and I told him, but after that trip he went back and he kept telling people over that he spent only a couple days in Eretz Yisrael, but the whole trip was worthwhile for this one shmuz that he heard from Nosson Tzvi Finkel that on that day. And the shmuz was about this of Chaim Shmulevitz, Nechbadus, and that the message for B'nai Torah that Chaim Shmulevitz was giving over was that if we want to be able to protect ourselves from the Yetzer Hara and to be able to hold ourselves to a certain standard of keeping the Torah and studying the Torah and absorbing it, what we need to be able to develop this midah, nechbadus, that we're going to realize that we're special and hold ourselves in such a way. Not to stick your nose down at somebody else, that wasn't the point. But the point was to realize that you have something precious that you are the holder of. So that is what Rav Wolbe now is also going to speak about. That he doesn't call it nechbadus, he calls it adinus hanefesh. Adinus hanefesh, adinus is somebody has a sensitivity, they have a feinkeit, that's adinus. Okay? Opposite, I guess, of somebody doing something that's unrefined. Right? There's a refinement of character. Okay. So we're going to continue with this idea. Where does this adinus come from? Where does a person's feeling of elevation come from? So I remember being in the Beis HaMusar in Yerushalayim and Rav Wolbe speaking about this, and he said that it comes from a person, this is what it's written here, it comes from a person realizing that they have an neshama, that's a chelek elokah mimal, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, here, I'm blowing my neshama, my ruach, my neshima is coming into you, and you are created b'tzelem Elokim. So a person doesn't have to start thinking about when it comes to in our generation, we have a problem with people not feeling good about themselves. They don't have self-esteem. So he said that self-esteem is something which should be very basic to a person, because a person doesn't have to start finding reasons to have self-esteem. The self-esteem is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu found me to be a worthwhile person and created me b'tzelem Elokim, and He gave me a neshama, that the neshama is so great and so lofty that nothing in this world could satisfy. That's who I am. So that's a feeling that a person has that's going to create this adinus, this sensitivity, this feeling of specialness inside of them.
Self-esteem is generally not a problem in our society today. I mean, now you have kids baseball teams, nobody wins and nobody loses, so that's a problem. The kids' self-esteem should be, so everyone gets a gold star, everybody gets an award.
Does it help? I want to know how much that helps.
It may not. In the end, the kids aren't prepared for real life.
Are you
in the schools? I mean, apparently, someone was telling the teacher. He said, I can't ask a kid a question unless he puts up his hand because his parents are saying, because if he doesn't know the answer, it's going to affect his self-esteem. The principals, our education. I don't know the Jewish schools, but the public schools, society.
No, the Jewish system also has to adapt to the dar. There was a dar when you could be much stronger on the students, and you could be
you could whip it around.
Too strong.
And put that in their place, right? You could put the student in his place. He didn't have proper conduct. He wasn't performing up to par, and so on. And he would hear about it, and he would more than hear about it, and he wouldn't want to repeat that.
The way it used to is that if you got a punishment from the Rabbi and you got home, You got a punishment from your parents for giving the Rebbe a reason to punish you. That's what used to happen in those days.
And now you have
Not anymore.
Now you have narcissism that's promoted by things like Facebook, where people put up pictures of their kittens as if the world cares about them and their kittens.
Here, look at me.
This is very, the world cares about
So
me.
we're talking about, right, we're not
No,
talking
but
about self-centeredness here. We have to realize even though we're talking about nechbados and the person feeling elevated, we're not talking about self-centeredness.
But you've got a whole other half of the world, which are women, who go through all sorts of image, like they don't like their body, they don't like, their hair color, the way they look, etc.
Let's turn this thing off.
No, I'm just saying.
He's not going to let it play anyway after he hears what's going on.
You're talking, you're talking as if it's all, like.
It doesn't exist, but it does exist. And that's one of the problems many times.
I had one boy and 3 daughters. Believe me, I know what the other, I know what the daughter end is. We think it isn't, but they're all like, she's too tall, she's too short, she's too big.
So they don't feel good about themselves, about their looks.
It's not that they don't feel something, that the society doesn't let them. They're so critical.
With the boys,
it's very hard to measure up to something that's not real. If you're looking at a picture of a model and that's not even really what the model looks like, it's just after they did some Photoshop. That's it's maybe they took one person's nose and one person's eyes and another person's mouth, and now this is what it looks like on Photoshop. So so of course you don't look like that. But I don't know. I think that. It's just very obvious that these people aren't happy. I mean, all the headlines are about like their problems in their life. How
it's not that they're not. It's not that they're not happy. It's some are comfortable with who and what they are, and they're going to be happy people, and they'll find someone else. But you got a whole bunch of girls all of a sudden got to all go on this crazy diet.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a husband, so I got to be pencil thin.
You're right. Okay, this is
one
a longer
kid later,
discussion.
they're back to normal.
This is a longer discussion, but definitely we are not. When we're talking about nechbados here, Nadine Zanefesh, we are not talking about because a person's good looking and a person, somebody's going to look at them and say, "Wow, you're so talented and you so good looking," and so on. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody's inner beauty, somebody's neshama that they have. They were created b'tzelem Elokim, that they have the capacity to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they have the capacity to help others. Thank you. Close the door. And to receive the Torah. And the first thing for a person to be a recipient of the Torah is for them to realize their own specialness, that they're going to receive the Torah, and how that's going to elevate them. And Rabbi says that the Gemara says, it's actually in the Brisa in Masechtas Avos, the Brisa, there's another Gemara about this, that says that one who studies Torah is mis'aleh. Ha'osek b'Torah, ha'reizeh mis'aleh. One who studies, delves into Torah, that elevates him. So, what does it mean? He's elevated. The Mishnah quotes a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Matan nachliel, minachliel bamas." Now, this is part of a Shira Sayam, and the pasuk says, "Matana nachliel, minachliel bamas." So Chazal Darshan that is saying that a person receives the Torah as a matana, and then as a nachala, that he gets it as an inheritance, and then bamas, he gets exalted. Bamas is a higher elevation. He gets elevated. That's one leads to the other. The Torah lifts up a person. So Rav Wolbe wants to say, what is this elevation that we're getting from the Torah? Is it that we're gaining more knowledge? Is it that we have a broader yediyos, we know more, we have better skills in terms of Torah study? That's not that's not called the hisalus. That's not called an elevation. What is an elevation is that a person, and if that's what the Torah is, a person studies and knows more and knows more. So there's one of the Mefarshim, the Chassid Yavitz, says, it describes such a person. He says, there's also in Maseches Avos, he says that we saw an Adam Gadol b'Torah shebe'emes ein chacham el yodei Torah. He knows Torah, but he's not really a chacham. Because why is that? Because it didn't elevate him. He wasn't letting himself become elevated through the Torah. So how does this elevation express itself? This is the way it expresses itself. That a person becomes more refined. A person becomes that they realize that they can't speak in a certain way, they can't treat somebody else in a certain way, they can't treat themselves in a certain way, because they have the Torah, they have the greatest gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was given, and it's infusing them with Kedusha. And where do we find this in the Torah besides this Nachliel Bamas? So we find that the Gemara about Lag BaOmer tells us that when it was all those 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, how were they nifter? Because they were like Nagu Kavod Zebazeh. So the Gemara says, when did this all happen? The Gemara in Yevamos Samach Beis says, when did this happen? Tana Kulam Mesu mi Pesach v'Atzeres. They all died from between Pesach and Atzeres. So why now? Like, why between Pesach and Shavuot? And the reason is because on their high level, this was something that was a big tzvi on them, that they couldn't pass on the Torah to the next generation. They couldn't be the vehicles to pass on the Torah. But what is this time between Pesach and Atzeres? So on Pesach, this Rabbi speaks about in a different place, let's briefly here. On Pesach, it's a night when every person feels like they went out of Mitzrayim, right? And that's back again to feeling like left Mitzrayim. But when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, there was a big Gilui Shechina. We were elevated to a status that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came b'chvaydai v'atmai, that it was a revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He's going to lift us up. But then we had to work we didn't keep that. That was just a gift, and it wasn't to keep. It was once a year we get elevated again on Pesach. But then we traveled to the Midbar, and we got to Matan Torah. So for 49 days, 7 weeks, we're working again to climb up the ladder to get to this level of elevation to receive the Torah. So this is the job of a person during these days. The job of a person is that they say, wow, I experienced Gilui Shechina on Pesach. I experienced the feeling of being the Am HaNivchar, of realizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking care of us, and we're underneath His Ava. But now I'm going to get to there to try to work myself up to be a proper Kli for the Kabbalah Torah. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by longing for this great gift, and I'm going to realize that this is a raimus. There's an elevation for Klal Yisrael, and through doing that, that's when a person could be a proper appreciative of the Torah, and they could be a proper Klei Kibbutz. So what we're saying is like this: the Talmid of Rabbi Akiva, they weren't holding there. They were holding by studying the Torah. They were holding by appreciating a good svara and a great lesson in the Torah. But says Rav Abba, what we see is lacking is in the area of kavod. And kavod, what is kavod? Kavod is the way that something is measured when it comes to ruchnius. When it comes to things in this world, so how do you measure something? How precious is it? Gold is this precious, silver is this precious, diamonds, and everything. Because of the price that the person's willing to pay for it, you see how much they value it. But when it comes to something that there is no price tag for, this ruchnius, so how do you show that this is something that's valuable to you? And how do you show that it's not just valuable in and of itself, but it's valuable to you, that it could do something for you, and it could change you, and it's precious to you? It's because you have a kavod, you have a chashivas, you have a respect, and yet you attach that this is something which is we need to stand up for. We need to realize that special. It's not just ordinary. And when you do that, then it's not just the Torah when it's in the Aron Kodesh. It's the Torah when your colleague, when your friend studies the Torah. It changes him too, and it changes you too. And then we have to realize that we have to be Nai Kavod to everyone. Everyone is receiving the Torah.
So basically, it comes down to it's not how much Torah you learn in your life, but how you let Torah affect your life.
That's right. How you let the Torah affect you is going to be the way that the Torah could change you. And if a person isn't isn't a vessel for accepting the Torah, so then they could study a lot of Torah. It could be academic, or it could even be something that perhaps even brings them to a certain level of closeness to, that they might have a spiritual experience here, and they could focus and they could dive in with kavanah and so on. But the question is it making a person more special? Is it making a person more refined? Is it turning us into people who have a sensitivity, that there's a feinkeit that is being developed within us? And everything in the Torah is very fine when a person studies it deeply. What is the difference between this svara, this logic, which is a true svara, and this one, which is not a true svara? And we have to think, and sometimes we have to work very hard to understand, why is it, where did Chazal see this drasha? Oh, it's one letter that was one word that was out of order. And why is this the Kal V'chomer? What about something else that the other side has? Oh, well, maybe we shouldn't consider that. We have to start breaking into what's really at the root of the matter. When it comes to Torah study, we start training ourselves to be very fine-tuned, and that could create within us that we could be also refined in terms of discerning a very special conduct in a practical way. In a practical way, in a couple examples of how this can manifest itself is, for example, Rabbi says that says in the Gemara in Sanhedrin that a person who says, "What do Talmidei Chachamim help us?" This is a level of apikorsis. A person is mevazeh Talmid Chacham, or even mevazeh his friend in front of a Talmid Chacham. He doesn't go and show disgrace to the Talmid Chacham directly. He's in front of a Talmid Chacham, and his friend is there with him, and he starts embarrassing or disgracing or telling off his friend, and in front of the Talmid Chacham. So now, this is something which he shouldn't be doing in the first place, right? He shouldn't be talking to another Jew like this. He shouldn't be mevazeh anybody. But when he's mevazeh somebody in front of a Torah scholar, what he's doing is he's showing, I'm not in awe of the Torah scholar. I don't feel like this is something which is so special that I have to conduct myself in an uplifted manner. So that's one way that we could show our chashivas, is with the showing kavod for those who study Torah and for all of clients, all recipients of the Torah, but even more so for those who study Torah, that they're the so to speak, the ones who are representing the Torah. Everyone is representing the Torah. But if somebody is studying Torah the more they're studying, the more they have to be representatives of the Torah. And then there's another example of when you're learning with the chavrusa. So, do we come on time to the chavrusa, or does he sit there waiting for us? So a person doesn't realize necessarily that making somebody wait is a way of saying, maybe your time is not so important. And coming on time to learn with the chavrusa. And then when the chavrusa is speaking, are we listening to him? And that's a hard one. Are we listening to him? So we should be zocheh to continue preparing for Kabbalah Torah, and we should become very elevated this Shavuot, And if we're going to take our Torah study and try to learn more Torah, it could all be within this framework, in the framework of the preciousness of the chashivas of Torah, right? That something so special, I want to chaperine, I want to get as much as I can, I want to get as much of this and get it as good as I can, the best way I can, and that's the framework to now maximize our time of Torah study in preparation for Shavuot. Okay,
Sure.